You're listening to
Catholic Sprouts,
the daily podcast for Catholic kids that strives to plant seeds of faith. Hey there, Sprouts. Today is Friday, March 4th, 2022. Today is also the feast day of a Polish saint who lived in the 1400s, Saint Casimir. Saint Casimir was the son of the Polish king. He was very, very devoted to both Mary and Jesus. He took on all forms of suffering to purify his love. And he was a favorite saint of Saint Pope John Paul II. He's a great example for us, once again, to resist greed, to resist ambition, and to instead devote our lives to Jesus. Now, this week, we have been talking about the first of the 7 deadly sins, and this sin is anger. Although anger can be good, in fact, is a proper response when we see someone speaking against God or harming another person, anger becomes a sin when it turns into hatred, when we stand with our fists clenched, when we hate someone for no real reason, and when we seek revenge. Yesterday, we talked about the first of 2 lessons that we hear from Christ on the cross. He says this simple phrase. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." And from this sentence, we can see that the big reason why we should always be quick to forgive is that there's always some level of ignorance, right? The person that has harmed us, there's something they didn't understand. There's some part of ourselves that we don't understand. And because of that, there is always room for forgiveness. Now, the second lesson from this very simple phrase, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do," is that forgiveness should be practiced without limit. Maybe you remember that story from the gospel where Peter asks Jesus, "How many times should I forgive my brother?" Right? How many times? Like 7 times? My brother goes and does something really terrible. Like if they steal from me. Should I say, "Okay, I forgive you"? Should I do that up to 7 times before I'm just like, "Nope, this relationship's over"? And Jesus doesn't say, "Oh yeah, 7 sounds good." He says something radical. Do you remember what he says? He says you should forgive up to 7 times 70 times. Now, maybe you're up to multiplication in math, but do you know what that number would be? 7 times 70? Well, it's 490. So you think, wow, I had to forgive someone 490 times. Wow. Well, truthfully, 7 is a symbolic number in the Bible. So 7 times 70, this means an infinite amount of times without limit. You should forgive and forgive and forgive and not even worry about keeping track because there's no number that is the biggest amount of times that you should forgive. There should be no limit to our forgiveness. We do this because this, of course, is what Jesus does, and we're called to be like Christ. But also, we'll remember that the measure with which we measure will be measured out for us, right? So if we forgive without limit, what will God do for us when we stand in judgment before Him? He also will forgive without limit. If instead, with each of our relationships, we're constantly keeping track and we're saying, "Ooh, I can't forgive you anymore. Oh, I gotta hold this resentment and grudge against you," then God will be angry with us when we stand before Him in judgment. So we are called to forgive so that we will be forgiven. Of course, Sprouts, we don't just say that we forgive so that we can pretend to be holy. Forgiveness always requires a deep change in our hearts, a totally letting go of hatred and starting again. This is what Christ offers for us through forgiveness, and it's really what we need to offer other people, right? Entering back into that relationship of love, not just saying we forgive, but actually forgiving. And so on this note of forgiveness, remember not only to offer forgiveness to other people, but to seek forgiveness from God through the sacrament of reconciliation. Make sure that you make plans to attend this sacrament at least once during Lent. And that's my challenge for you today. Just think, when was the last time I went to confession? Do I need to go again soon? That's it for Catholic Sprouts today. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, continue to grow in your faith and truly sprout into the beautiful creation that God created you to be. Just one more thing. This is your invitation to come and join us for Lent inside the Amen app from the Augustine Institute. In there, you will find a recorded version of the Jesus Tree. Our very, very popular Lenten devotional is based on the Gospel of Matthew, and the recorded version will take you day by day through the entire Gospel so that you can truly walk from the cradle to the grave to the resurrection with Christ this Easter season. The Amen app is 100% free. You can find it in the App Store or on Google Play, 100% free. Simply look for the Jesus Tree and get started. There is a separate devotional for each day of Lent. This is what my family will be using, and it would be such an honor if your family or your classroom would join us. You can find the direct link to download the Amen app from the Augustine Institute in the notes for this podcast episode.
This show is a production of the Spoke Street Media Podcast Network. For more great podcasts, visit spokestreet.com.